Steve is a guy calling from Nebraska. And Steve's question is, are the hosts familiar with, hi, Steve, familiar with the wow signal of the terrestrial genetic code, unquote, paper published with apparent intelligently designed rhythmic pattern? Steve, you are on AXP.
Yeah, mathematical pattern. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. You are on AXP with Secular Rarity and Johnny P. Angel. I'm not familiar with it. SR, how about you?
I wasn't. And when I saw this in the queue and I went and looked it up, and then when I went and looked it up, it sparked a memory. A little bit of this. I'm not terribly familiar, but I have heard something about this in the past. But so yeah, like I'm definitely not an expert on it. There are people that could have a lot more information. But what about it particularly is interesting to you?
Give us the elevator speech. What is it?
Exactly.
And why is that important to you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, about 10 years ago, a couple of scientists published their discovery of this apparent intelligently designed arithmetical or mathematical pattern in our genetic code that depicts the symbol of an Egyptian triangle as well as the number 37 embedded in our genetic code. And how that message gets conveyed is, geneticists can sufficiently define 8 of the canonical amino acids by the composition of their codons' first and second base nucleotides. And then the nucleon sum of these amino acid side chains is 333, which would be 37 times 3 squared. And the sum of their block nucleons, which is their basic core structures, 592, which is 37 times 4 squared. And then the sum of the total nucleons is 925, which is 37 times 3 squared. And when you factor 37 out of this, it results in 3 squared plus 4 squared plus 5 squared, which is a perfect mathematical representation of an Egyptian triangle. So what do you guys think if there's a message in our genetic code of an Egyptian triangle and the number 37?
Steve,
what do you guys think of that, if that works?
Did you possibly, and I won't fault you if the answer is no, trust me, but did you possibly hear some of the previous callers today that were discussing all of these intricate math, connections and connections through language and specific dates? Did you hear any of those calls? Yes or no?
I'm sorry, I joined the show.
That's okay.
No, that's fine.
No. That's totally fine. And the reason I wanted to say that is because I wanted to make sure we were all on the level here. So what I'll say is we have had a couple of people today specifically that have called in with this theme. I don't know if there's something in the water or what, but it doesn't matter. Because it's kind of interesting, I think. And basically, kind of what Johnny and I were saying to those folks, and I think it applies here too, is humans have this incredible ability to find insane patterns, and not just find insane patterns, but also develop intensely super cool backstories for the existences of those patterns, despite the actual truth of those backstories or patterns, right? All of the stuff that you were just saying does seem kind of cool, right? If big if, which is if it is actually true, if there is some method that we can utilize to help us determine what is real here and what is just a coincidence, right? And so ultimately, it seems to me that this is kind of in that same boat. And when I'm just looking at, and again, believe me, man, I said from the beginning, I am not an expert on this. There could be some very basic information about this that I'm getting very wrong, but it appears that the paper that you're talking about was referencing a signal that SETI received in 1977. And that these researchers
that's what the paper...
That's what the wow signal is, right?
No,
that's what That's a different.
He's talking about something else.
Subject.
Yeah.
That was a radio. That was a radio subject.
No, hang on, because
subject.
I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. You're talking about the wow signal of the terrestrial genetic code.
Okay.
An article by Dr. Vladimir Sherbeck and Maxim Makakov. Am I wrong on this?
Right.
That is based off, that paper is based off of that signal. And what they do is they take that signal and they then find other similarities throughout other things like our genetic code. They use this particular pattern to then show that genetic code in and of itself has this intense flexibility, and you could input all kinds of other so all of this comes from this pattern that was discovered in 1977 by SETI. I just want to make sure I'm right on that, because if I'm off on that, then everything else I'm thinking.
The SETI signal in 72 was a radio signal, and what this paper is a signal that's in the genetic code. They took that signal that was discovered by SETI, and they then compared it to the genetic code and said that signal and this code have intense similarities.
I found if this
please help us.
We're talking about the same thing. I found a website talking about it. Obviously, this is not how you do scientific research. People.
No. This is all on the fly, guys.
You don't hire a supposed lawyer to do any of this stuff. But as I read this website, pandasthumb.org, whatever that is, design signals generated by targeted manipulation. There is another more serious objection to Sherbeck and Makukov's method, which they don't mention. It works frequently only by a trick. The amino acid proline does not fit into the scheme, so the authors modify it. To do so, they formally remove an H atom from the side chain of proline and transfer it to the secondary amino group, and they have a figure. This makes proline the primary amino acid. The purpose of this operation is to formally standardize the basic structures of all amino acids, as authors mention. This is because proline is the only secondary amino acid in the genetic code. But standardizing means nothing other than purposefully changing facts to introduce the divisor 37 through the back door. In contrast to other amino acids, the molecular weight of the proline basic structure 73 cannot be divided exactly by 37, yada, 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 yada. It goes on and on and on. And basically what it is they monkeyed with the numbers.
Yes,
to make it fit.
That's why I wanted to make sure that I was right in the basis of comparing it to that signal, because even though I hadn't looked further into that like you just did for us, which I very much appreciate, I thought that was going to be what we discovered, was that they had this signal, they monkeyed around with some other data, and then said, look, they're the same.
Incidentally, I'm not reading this at all. Incidentally, it is not surprising that in the numerical cosmos, which functions under certain rules and laws, certain order patterns like Egyptian triangles, golden triangles, Fibonacci numbers, ascending numerical sequences, prime numbers, etc., can be found, which as brute facts neither allow an explanation or even demand one. And then, I mean, unrelated to me just coming up with that off the top of my head, I found a website that has more. Yeah, pandasthumb.org archives genetic code wow signal. It sounds like what it is again, our old friend from today, pareidolia. Or maybe there's some other numerological thing.
Gotta be.
I appreciate...
Numerodolia?
Yeah, numerodolia. Steve, it sounds like... it sounds like there's something interesting going on here. And it sounds like maybe some additional information. You should research it. But it sounds like just the fact that they found some connections between things in this paper doesn't mean that those connections actually exist, and that there's not naturalistic explanations for those connections if they do exist. So certainly worth looking more.
Well, anyways, it's a great paper worth reading. It's the WOW signal of the terrestrial genetic code. It was published in Icarus. I think in
definitely something to look further into, I think, Steve.
Steve, is this the reason why you believe in God?
Yeah, it's too much to discuss.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Well, I mean, how do I know it's a particular God that put it there? It could have been panspermia by extraterrestrials.
Sure,
that's a good point.
Yeah,
a good point, Steve.
I mean, it proves a higher power to me than we human beings. We're not the the highest power in the universe, but it doesn't prove anything more.
It doesn't even necessarily prove that a so-called higher power exists. It just means that there are connections between things that have numerical relations to each other, and it could just be a function of physics. And you could say, well, who made the function of physics? And it could be like, well, in every other instance where physics doesn't work this way, and it doesn't lead to chemistry behaving this way, we don't have intelligent creatures that can look at it. It could be the Celestials during the first host when they visited the Earth, that they started messing with the human genome and creating the deviants and the Eternals, as we all know. It could be that.
Ancient astronaut theorists have come up with a bunch of theories here about ancient astronauts. So come on, if you don't know that.
But message received, Steve. This is interesting stuff, and I think going through the process of figuring out why this is a something or this is a nothing is a great exercise of skepticism for anyone. And I'm not saying that you believe because of this, but I wanted to know why you believe. Do you believe in the existence of a supernatural realm, Steve? Independent of this.
I don't think there's a way to prove or it's not a falsifiable or verifiable theory. I mean, I don't. It's kind of meaningless to me if you can't prove or disprove something.
Okay,
it doesn't really have a meaning to me.
And I can certainly appreciate that position. Our call screener puts you down as a theist. Do you believe in the existence of a God?
I believe in. There could be many gods. There could be no God. There could be. I can't. There's no way for me to know for sure.
Okay. There could be no gods.
It's I mean, it could be. I would say agnostic, probably more is what I am.
If you had like are you more convinced that a God exists, or less convinced that a God exists, a God or gods, any supernatural stuff?
God, I mean, I've had you were talking to that guy who was on ketamine earlier.
Sure.
And I've had out of body, I've had personal experiences. I've had an out of body experience. I was 13 years old and I hyperventilated and held my breath and passed out. And then I felt my body lifting out of my body and I saw this light and went back in. But maybe the brain does funny things when it gets deprived of oxygen. I don't know what to make of that. But I mean, it kind of made me feel like a certain oneness with the universe, kind of a feeling, a spiritual type of a feeling. But that's just a personal experience that I had.
Sure, I have.
It didn't lead me to a particular deity or anything crazy like that.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say crazy. Sorry, I don't want to offend you out there.
We get what you're saying.
You sound like you're a pretty reasonable guy, Steve. What you're saying right now. I mean, I've had experiences of my own, and that I felt a oneness with humanity and existence. And
of course.
Continuation from beginning to end and beyond. And either on or off substances that I would never admit on air I've ever done, because why the hell would you do that? But I've certainly heard stories from friends who've had those experiences, and they're open to all kinds of stuff. But who can know? But I think, would you agree, Steve, that the time to make an affirmative claim that a supernatural type of reality actually does exist is when you've been, when you have sufficient evidence to establish it, and not before, right?
And that's an extraordinary claim too. Once you make a claim, the burden of proof is on you making that claim. So I'm not going to make that claim, because that puts a lot on on me.
Yeah.
To have to prove it.
I'm in the same boat. Like we said earlier, I don't believe in God, but I don't think God doesn't exist. I strongly suspect that God doesn't exist, but I wouldn't go that far, because I don't think I know enough. I've seen through time and space and in relative dimensions in space. I haven't done any of that stuff. I'm just a regular guy. So rather than make that bold claim, like you're saying, it's an extraordinary claim. Back off.
Yeah.
What can you say? Well, I haven't seen enough. I have questions, certainly. I appreciate your call, Steve. SR, any other thoughts you want to have with Steve?
Just that, man, seriously. I feel like you are on the right track. And I always love to say this, which is just because somebody is a theist, just because somebody is a believer in a deity or the supernatural, doesn't mean that we're not on the same side and on the same team. I don't know much about you, Steve, right? We just started talking, but the mindset I feel like you have laid out for us today is one that means if you are presented with good evidence, you will evaluate it honestly, and you will take it on board and adjust your views accordingly. And I think that is the mindset that will make the world a better place. And I think time and time again, when we find those people who also are in that boat, we ought to let them know, you're one of us, bud. You are right here with us. You are on our team, because the more of us that have that mindset, the faster we're going to get to a better world. And that's, I think, what we're all going for. So, yeah, thank you, Steve. That was a great freaking call, man.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on. You guys have a great day.